Welcome to Follow the Lamb Bible study on the sanctuary. We left off talking about how the ark was to be ported, and we mentioned that the location where David was taking the ark was originally 800 years before the coronation of David. It had been the home of Melchizedek, the priest of the Most High God. It held a central and elevated position in the country and was protected by an environment of hills. Being on the border between Benjamin and Judah, it was in close proximity to Ephraim and was easy to access by the other tribes. Patriarchs and Prophets 7:03. In order to secure this location, they had to dispossess the Kenites of Zion and Moriah. Now the fate of Uzzah, who reached up to touch the ark and died, was a divine judgment upon the violation of a most explicit command. Through Moses, the Lord had given special instruction concerning the transportation of the ark. None but the priests, the descendants of Aaron, were to even touch it or even to look upon it uncovered. Conflict and Courage 176, paragraph 2. The priests were to cover the ark. Like Aaron the high priest would cover it with this veil between the holy and the most holy. And then finally, the final covering was a covering of blue, because inside is the Ten Commandments. So then they were pulling it to the edge where the priest to carry it could get it and take it without going inside the most holy place. The Kohathites were the ones to transport it. To the Gershonites and the Merarites, who had in charge the curtains and the boards and the pillars, Moses gave carts drawn by oxen, but not to the Kohathites, because they were to carry on their shoulders. It was a sign of respect, high regard for the Ten Commandments, God's law. This is found in Numbers chapter 7, verse 9. Numbers chapter 7, verse 9. Thus, in the beginning in bringing the ark from Kirjath Jearim, there had been a direct and inexcusable disregard of the Lord's directives. Conflict and Courage 176, paragraph 3. Even though the heart was right and they were doing something marvelous, they did it in the wrong way, and it is important to follow God's directions. The Philistines, who had not a knowledge of God's law, had placed the ark on a cart drawn by oxen. The Lord accepted the effort which they had made, but the Israelites had in their hands a plain statement of the will of God in all these matters, and their neglect of these instructions was dishonoring to God. Upon Uzzah rested the greater guilt of presumption. Transgression of God's law had lessened his sense of its sacredness. The more you break the commandments, the more you think it doesn't really matter. All of the commandments are to be obeyed. Honoring the mother and father, not stealing, not killing, not telling lies. All the commandments are very important. Thus, God had allowed and caused the death of Uzzah for direct disregard. The death of that one man, by leading the people to repentance, might prevent the necessity of inflicting judgment upon thousands. Conflict and Courage 176, paragraph 4. None but the priests, the descendants of Aaron, were even to touch it or look upon it uncovered. The divine directive was, the sons of Kohath shall bear it, but they shall not touch any holy thing lest they die. Numbers 4, verse 15. Patriarchs and Prophets 7:05, paragraph 2. The Lord could not accept the service because it was not performed in accordance with his directions. Uzzah was angry with the oxen because they stumbled. He showed a manifest distrust of God, as though he who had brought the ark from the land of the Philistines could not take care of it now. Angels who attended the ark struck down Uzzah for presuming impatiently to put his hand upon the ark. Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 1, page 410, paragraph 1. For presuming to touch the symbol of God's presence, he was smitten with instant death. Volume 8 of the Testimonies, page 284 by Ellen White. He was not placed, God has not placed on men the power to say, you shall do this and you shall not do that. But there is a power exercised in Battle Creek. This is an application of the principle of the problem that Uzzah had, applying it to our time. God did not give men the power to say, you shall do this, you shall not do that. But there is a power exercised in Battle Creek that God has not given, and he will judge those who assume this authority. They have somewhat of the same spirit that led Uzzah to lay his hand on the ark to steady it, as though God was not able to care for his sacred symbols. Far less of man's power and authority should be exercised toward God's human agencies. Brethren, she says, leave God to rule. You see, applying it even more directly, if someone commands someone that God has called in the night to go on a mission, if someone tries to stop them and tells them, stay home and chop wood, like a man who now no longer lives, shouted at me. He said, Madam, just stay home and chop wood. What are you doing going on these mission trips for? And another person shouted at me, you're no longer my relative because you should be driving a sports car and living in a mansion. Why are you going on all these mission trips? Their spirit was not from heaven, for God had given me the directive to go preach the gospel, and they were trying to stop it. It is not man's job to decide such things. And it is of the same problem that Uzzah had, laying his hand on the ark to steady it as though God was not able to care for it himself. Interesting thought, isn't it? That's from Testimonies to Ministers, page 347. Today, he is just as desirous as in the days of Uzzah, that men shall know his ways, that they shall reverence the methods he outlined for their guidance. They are to carry out the plans he has devised. When men feel that it is unimportant to obey, thus saith the Lord, in caring for his work, but that their own plans should be followed, they thereby evidence unfitness for any position of trust in his cause. In any effort to advance the interests of his work, we must lose sight of ourselves and keep in view God's glory. Review and Herald, September 14, 1905, paragraph 5. These are very, very important things. If we command someone thinking that we have the right to decide what service they can do for God, when God called them and God gave them abilities and God gave them ability to learn and speak in many languages, and when they try to take away their documents so they cannot travel, they have God to deal with. And as Uzzah gives us an example, we should be respectful to what God desires. God had commanded that no hand but that of a consecrated priest should touch the sacred repository of his law, and special ceremonies of purification and preparation were enjoined. So it's a very important lesson. It's amazing how important it is. Uzzah touched it with sinful, unhallowed hand and was slain before the Lord. And David was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, how shall the ark of the Lord come to me? And he left the ark in the house of Obed-Edom. And the Lord blessed that man, Obed-Edom, and all his household because of the ark. Signs of the time, July 24, 1884, paragraph 6. Now a third story, and then I'm going to tell another story of testimony, and I'm finished. David was fleeing before his son Absalom. Absalom was counseled by the grandfather to Bathsheba that he should take over the kingdom and kill his father. And David was humbled and greatly distressed, and he fled from Jerusalem to save his life. He did not go forth with confidence and kingly honor, trusting in God as he had in previous years. But as he went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olivet, surrounded by his people and his mighty men, his head was covered in humility. David for a moment sees the star of hope when they come with the ark. Please come and check on the recording. When the march of the procession is arrested by Zadok and Abiathar with the Levites who come bearing the ark, the symbol of God's presence, David for a moment sees the star of hope amid the clouds, for this precious token is with him. But then he gives the royal command, carry the ark back, because unselfishly and nobly, David realizes that the ark will be in jeopardy of danger, of rain and destruction, and his reverence and respect for the ark of God would not allow him to consent that it should be imperiled. So he sent it back. To rob the city of that symbol, he could not consent. If he was selfish, he would have allowed it. Now, my own personal testimony, we had the ark on the car inside on the top, and we were traveling to Mexico to do a program. The car was in trouble, the oil was leaking, and a policeman stopped me for polluting the air. I kept praying, where's the Jordan River? When we get to that Jordan River, I'm sure that the Lord will heal my car or do something for me. When we reached and crossed the border, suddenly as we checked the oil, there was no more sign of lack of oil. God had healed the car, and it never needed more oil as we went through the rest of our journey. Many mechanics came to check it out. There is a special blessing attending the work of sharing the gospel. The three angels' messages are in the tabernacle. And the more you understand the holy and the most holy and all the types and symbols in the prophecies, the more you realize the faith will grow and you will be prevented from being deceived in these last days. Thank you for watching as we have studied the tabernacle message. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.